This week, the right has once again been divided as Donald Trump recently put out a video outlining his stance on abortion. Right after this video, the Arizona Supreme Court declared that an anti-abortion law from 1864 was in fact constitutional and legitimate. In response to this, Trump said that the law went too far and called on the Arizona legislature to fix it. Trump favorite Kari Lake then came out with a video that, in my opinion, goes much farther, advocating for a woman's right to choose. As a result of all these things, the Christian right is now asking once again whether or not we can still vote for Trump in good conscience. In this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by Pastor Andrew Isker, aka BonifaceOption, to answer this question and discuss why I think the 2024 election is the end game. All this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, a follower of Christ Jesus, just doing my best to represent him well everywhere I go. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm joined by returning guest Andrew Isker. So, Andrew, go ahead and say hello to our guests. Introduce yourself to those who are not yet familiar. And we do have a slight echo, and I'm not sure if it's on your end. So,
I hope not.
That a bit. So,
go ahead. I'll maybe it is. I always have audio problems. Everyone always lets me know that my audio is bad. So, yes, I'm Andrew Isker. I'm a pastor in southern Minnesota, and I've written a couple books. I post online. I do create content, all of that kind of stuff. And I have been involved in this discussion on, especially on Trump and abortion and the larger political picture and what it means, especially because most people don't have any like solid Christian teaching about how to engage in politics, right? It's either this Anabaptistic, just withdraw, not care about politics at all and don't do anything, or it's idealistic and almost utopian, where we have to have our exact polity and everything perfectly right now. And so what, if those are the two options, is there anything in between that we can do? And it doesn't seem like there's very much that people want to say. And that's within like the people that are solid, right? That have their heads on straight. I'm not even talking about like the David Frenches and Russell Moores that just say that Trump is bad, be a good Christian and call him evil, right? And so that's a dynamic as well. That affects the church as well. So there's not enough discussion about, okay, what do we do from here, right? What is the actual reality that we're facing, and how do we respond? What do we say? What do we do? How do we vote? All of these things. So I'm happy to join you to talk about that today.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you back. And before we get much further into the conversation, those of you watching, feel free to go over to our Substack if you haven't already. It is forgeandanvil.substack.com. You can sign up for free to get free content, and you can also become a paid supporter if you'd like to help the show grow. We appreciate it. And of course, be sure to check out last week's episodes that we did with Gabe Wrench. And Todd Erzin and John Moody did an extra episode. So I didn't do any of our In the Van segments last week, but I threw out a full-length episode for you guys as an extra. So I think I made up for it. So, and of course, follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you prefer, at Forge and A for additional content and updates on the show. So, yeah, Andrew, originally when I reached out to you, I mentioned that I was hoping to have you on to talk about vice presidential candidates that Donald Trump might pick. And honestly, that discussion had to take a back seat because the abortion topic took up everyone's time and energy with this week. And I know some of you individuals who may be listening have already heard some of these arguments already. But of course, I don't want to assume that everyone in my audience is as much of a weirdo as me and spends all their time in online circles. So some of you guys may not have heard this at all. So honestly, I can go ahead and play the original Trump clip if we'd like, but I think it's pretty straightforward what Trump was ultimately getting at in his initial announcement. Essentially, Trump said that he is pro-life in the same sense that Ronald Reagan is, meaning he believes in the exceptions. He believes it is a state rights issue that should have exceptions for incest, rape, and the life of the mother. A lot of individuals started hammering at Trump for this, and as I mentioned in my intro, it was, I think, the next day or two, shortly thereafter, that the Arizona Supreme Court upheld a law from 1864. Now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, it was a law that essentially went into effect the moment Roe v. Wade was overturned, but it was being worked out in the courts. So the Arizona Supreme Court said that this law is official and it stands, and it does not have all those exceptions that Trump laid out. So Trump then went on to say that this abortion law in Arizona goes too far, and he called on the Arizona legislature to fix it, is what he said. So a lot of individuals are starting to call Donald Trump pro-choice. I don't personally think that's fully fair. I don't think it's quite an honest assessment, but I can understand why they say that. But that is essentially the groundwork for this discussion. So first and foremost, Andrew, I mean, I want to talk a lot about the election and whether or not we can vote Trump. But first, I mean, do you think that the accusation that Trump is pro-choice, do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, it's funny because it's like, I saw it was like JD Greer was saying this, and other like squishy Big Eva types are calling him, pro-choice, when the position that he has is really indistinguishable from what the mainstream of the Republican Party has had for 50 years. And so it's comical to me in that sense, because they're attacking him. Those people are attacking him on this issue, not because all of a sudden they have this consistent pro-life view where abortion is murder and it has to be stopped. Right. They're totally comfortable with like the March for Life position, or, the various large pro-life organizations that are like 15 weeks is good. That's fine. Right. That's their standard view. Right. They were fine with that until Trump did this. Now they're like, no, he's pro-choice. He's betraying us. All of this stuff. And so it's really hypocritical from those people. And it's frankly kind of disgusting that they would use this issue to attack him on, because they just want to attack him, not because they actually care about the issue. So there's that. And then on the other hand, I mean, I think people who have maintained the view that I hold, that abortion is murder, and there can't be exceptions because it's a human being that's created in the image of God at conception. So yeah, of course it is. And so in that sense, he's pro-choice, right? In the sense that every Republican, like Ron DeSantis in Florida, signed a bill that was at 6 weeks. Right. And so he's saying, yeah, I'm pro-choice up to 6 weeks, right? The whole GOP is this way. You're just picking an arbitrary line at which point you're not pro-choice. And of course, the Democratic Party it's well beyond pro-choice. It's all abortions everywhere for any reason whatsoever, like up until the moment, even beyond the moment of birth, right? If you got a pinky toe in the birth canal, you can kill that baby, right? That's the view the Democrats have. That's what they haven't. That's the law they passed in 2022 immediately, or 2023 immediately in my state after they gained power in both houses. And so what you're looking at is one party that is fully on the side of all abortions, all child sacrifice anywhere for any reason, and another party that wants to somewhat limit it. Right. Those are the options, at least in terms of the large picture in the country. And so a lot of it, I think, stepping back for a second and just analyzing the landscape is important for us, because we can have the ideals that we have, and I hold them. Like I believe this is murder, this is wrong, it has to end. And we are in a country where every single person that attains the age of 18 that hasn't committed a felony, and they get a say, right? And the overwhelming majority of them are okay with at least some abortion, right? That's the population we have in the United States of America today, and you have to appeal to the mass population in order to gain political power. And so within that context, right, the question is, well, what do you do? Right? What do Christians do when we don't have political power? right? That's the thing that I think no one wants to really grapple with, is like the elephant in the room is we don't have political power to accomplish the ends that we want. So what do we do? Right. And some say, right, we just need to stand our ground, not compromise on anything. And even with our votes, right, don't vote for anybody who is not going to hold the same position that you do, which, I mean, it's a valid one. I'm not going to attack someone for like holding that position, saying they're insane or they're wrong. Like that's a position that people hold in faith, and they believe that's the right thing that God wants them to do. So I'm not going to, bind somebody's conscience or anything like that. I think if that's how they feel, that's fine. But at the same time, it's a question of like what voting is, right? Is voting an endorsement of every position that every political figure has, right? Even the most abominable ones, right? Is it an endorsement of them, or is it simply saying, I would rather have this person wield political power than that person, right? And people are like, you're making the lesser of two evils argument, and it's still evil. And it's like, well, that's what politics is, right?
Right.
You're not within the realm of ideals. You're within the realm of realities. And so if you think about the ends that these things accomplish, right? So if say the people that say, no, we can only accept people that have the end goal position that we want as political candidates, and we won't vote for them unless they do this. And say we persuade somehow all of evangelical Christianity in America to have that position, right? Which that doesn't currently, because the church has been abysmal on these things. But say we did, say the 10, 20, maybe 30 million American Christians all held this position consistently and believed abortion is murder. Human beings are made in the image of God from the moment of conception, so it has to end. Even abortifacient contraception, that has to be banned too. And we won't vote for anybody unless they hold that position. And you have this consistent voting block of like 20 or 30 million people. What will happen then if you could move the Republican Party to your position, right? I don't think it's ludicrous to think that. Like you could, right? You could move the Republican Party to that position, and then what? Right? Then what happens? They lose every election. They just do. And you look at how the left has produced rapid social change in the country, partly because they hold institutional power in mass media, in academia, even in commercial enterprises and Wall Street and so forth. And so they're able to gain power in those things, and also and spread their ideas throughout the entire populace. But also they gain power without telegraphing what they're going to do. Right? Barack Obama runs for president and says, I believe in marriages between a man and a woman in 2008. And then what happens in 2015? Right? He appoints Supreme Court justices that give us Obergefell. And it's always this wink, wink, nod, nod thing. Yeah, I totally believe marriages between a man and a woman. And then he does the opposite, right? That's how they wield power very shrewdly, because because gay marriage was extremely unpopular. I mean, the state of California in 2008 voted overwhelmingly against it. And so within 7 years later, you get Obergefell, and the entire country is transformed, and immediately everyone wakes up and like, yeah, I'm totally pro-gay. Gay is good. Love is love, man. And even among evangelical Christians, it's this way. And so, right, how did that happen? Right? Did it happen because the far left and gay activists and everything said, we're never going to vote for you people unless you hold this position we have? No, they didn't do that at all. They instead, right, voted for these people, worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gaining power, both political power and institutional power, and produced what we have today. And that is, I mean, they're Gramsciites, right? They move slowly through institutions, and they're also, they understand power in a way that we just don't. And it's funny because, I was on I think you mentioned like the Twitter space, and I was on that Twitter space, and people were like, no, Jesus doesn't want us to use power. That's not Christian. And it's like, well, I don't know what we're doing this for then, man. Like, if in order to ban abortion, you got to have power, right? Period. End of the day, you've got to have power. And if we're not gonna engage in those things at all, then I guess, go find your Amish commune to go live on. Right. And so, that's sort of how I look at it, is that we are in a clearly a post-Christian America where the Christian, social and cultural mores that existed 100 years ago are gone completely. And and those things took centuries, millennia to build up, and they were torn down in the space of a single generation. Yeah. And so how do you bring that back? Right? Do you bring it back in the ballot box? I don't think you can. In under the current political arrangement, I don't think it's possible. So if it's not, then what do you do? Right? Do you just disengage, or do you vote for the person who is going to prevent our country from being invaded by tens of millions of people from third world countries illegally? Vote for someone who's going to keep us out of World War III. Those things matter too, right? Part of it too is like we're so much closer to nuclear war today than maybe any point in the Cold War. I don't think people adequately understand this. Like you're like, I saw on Twitter a picture of like some mall somewhere where they talked about like nuclear. There's like a big, public address, poster about nuclear fallout shelters and things like that. And I'm like, whoa, it's a thing again, isn't it? And that's, abortion is this horrific, terrible evil where 1 million people a year still are killed by abortion. And we'd be talking about billions of people being killed. So, if we want to do like the moral calculus that way, I'm going to vote for the guy who's going to prevent billions of people from being killed, even if he's not going to remove the high places. That's one of the arguments, that I've made on this issue is you read through in the Book of Kings, right? You have a number of kings that were told, right, did good in the sight of the Lord, right? This guy was a good king. He was faithful king, did good in the sight of the Lord. And then there's but he didn't remove the high places. And like the analogy is like 1-to-1, right? The high places, this is where they sacrifice children, man. Like this is the same thing, right? The Planned Parenthoods, those are the high places. It's a demonic sacrament. Yeah. That, everyone knows like the Peter Kreeft quote. Yeah, it is. Everybody knows like the Peter Kreeft quote, like that it's the inverse of the Lord's Supper, where, your life for mine rather than my life poured out for you. And it's like, that's what it is. And so if you, and for a long time, I didn't understand, right? You'd read through 1st and 2nd Kings, and you'd see these kings, and it's like, why don't they just do it? Why don't they just get rid of the high places? Right? Why are they so cowardly? Why won't they do it? And then you begin to understand like political politics and how politics works, where even kings are bound by a mandate to rule. And if the people want the high places, you have a hard time getting rid of them. Even if you're a king, even if nobody's voting for you, right? There's still a mandate for rule that gets taken away. Where if you do that, you could be overthrown. And like there were coups that took place in the Northern Kingdom of Israel. And that's what would happen to you if you did that, if you do something intensely unpopular. Yeah. And so you see why they didn't do it, right? Not because they were cowardly. Maybe they were. Josiah was able to do it at the very end, and it was too late. But right, that's why they didn't, because they lived in a world that was very real, where they couldn't do it. They couldn't get rid of it, and yet they still are called kings that did good in the sight of the Lord. Right? That's the thing that I think is interesting, where you can have wicked kings that keep the high places, and you can have good kings that do too. Right? That's and it's crazy because God isn't this like perfection. The way we think it is this way, because we see it that that we see what should be done and what must be done, and the thing that is crying out to heaven for vengeance every single day in our country, and judgment that will come to us because of it. And yet you can have good kings that are not able to, for whatever reason, to deal with the problem. And yet you if you're an Israelite living in Israel or Judah during this time, right? What do you still have to support your king, right? You still like because you're constantly getting invaded and having to go to war. And the way you don't vote, but you show up for the muster when it's time to go fight. And you don't say, well, I'm going to withhold my services fighting for my country because I don't agree with the high places. Like, you need to get rid of the high places. And that just ensures you're going to lose, right? You're going to lose your country, and you're going to be invaded and occupied. So like, I look at it like that, and that's a really tough position to be in, because we want to have the thing that we want, that is good and right and true. We want the thing that is bringing judgment on our people to end, but we don't have the power to get rid of it. Right.
Yep.
So in that circumstance, what do you do? Right.
Yeah.
That's the question I'm more interested in bringing, to everybody's mind.
Yeah.
Is the world isn't so simple, right? It's not like it was when I was, 21 or 22 years old, where everything was black and white, and it's like, this is wrong, this is right. We just need to end the Fed, man. It's like, okay, well, we're not gonna. So now what? Yeah. It's stuff like that, where it's like, how do you engage in politics with a very long-term goal? Because I think that's what this is, a very long-term goal.
Yep.
Of changing, because some of it too is like, and this is another thing that I had posted is, and I think even people who disagree with me on the issue, like they get it, they get this, that the massive cultural change that took place over the last, Renaissance of Men. I'm reading the chats. I'm here for it. Me too, man. I love it. But
just here for end of the Fed.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck. Yeah. But like, I'm like, we've had this massive cultural change that I don't think people, because you grow up in the world that you're in, that you're a fish in water, and you don't know anything other than that. But 100 years ago, and really all of history before that, like, you had families, you had marriage, you had like this cohesive society that functioned, that worked. You had communities of people, and all those things are gone, right? It's all, everyone's been totally deracinated. Families don't really exist anymore. Divorce is massive, or marriage really doesn't exist in a true legal sense. In the way that it used to, it's kind of just more of a legal agreement for boyfriend and girlfriend than it is actual marriage. Right. At this point today, especially like when they let, gay people do it. It's not, is it really marriage at that point? Yes. Hello.
Hey, Shara. Welcome in.
And so like all these things are gone. You have this change between where there's a clear distinction between men and women, in terms of their roles in society, their roles in the household. That is all blurred, right? You have most women are expected to, go to high school, then to college, and go have a career. And if you get married and have kids, that's cool. That's a fun, like, lifestyle choice that you can make. But the baseline is, you go to college, you go have a career, you enter the workforce, and you're the same as men are. And that, the effect of that, and then, I mean, the flip side of that too is, right, in your 20s, you get to go sow your wild oats and be as promiscuous as you want. And you should have the same freedom that men have, where men can just go out and have as much sex as they want, and they never get pregnant, obviously. I mean, that's a point of contention, I guess, now. But
yes, it is.
But in reality, like, they're treated the same way. You have to have this total sexual autonomy, and abortion is central to that. It's just a form of birth control to our entire country. And so if you take that away, like, you're taking away the like foundation of our entire social order as it exists today, because you take that away, and now men and women aren't equal anymore. Now woman gets pregnant, she's got a baby, and she's got to take care of that baby. And so, right, it reintroduces reality to this messed up social order that we have. And they're not going to like just take that line down and just say, okay, yep, cool, we'll just revert back to 100 years ago. No, that's not what's going to happen. They don't want, they like the trash world that they live in. They're not going to just give it up freely. And so when Dobbs was decided, everyone just thought like, oh, abortion's over now. We finally got rid of Roe versus Wade. We're cool. This is great. And really what it did is it exposed just how much our country loves abortion. I think like back to the Ohio referendum from, I think it was 2022 when that was or no, it was 2023. I think it was 23. Yeah. It's 23. And like Ohio is a pretty consistently red state for the last several election
Trump
cycles.
plus 8.
Yeah, very consistent red state, especially recently. It was kind of purple during the Bush years, but and Obama, but pretty consistent red state. And the abortion ban that was up for a referendum failed. And you wonder like, okay, you can like get into the details of it where it's like,
and by failed, do you mean it went into law? It became enshrined in their constitution.
I had it backwards, but like, now there's, Ohio is a pro-choice, state. Right. And so you could say, well, the pro-life movement didn't do a good job politically, leveraging all their assets and things like that. Like Lizzie Marbach did a lot of work there in Ohio, Right to Life. And she could, describe all that in detail and all the failures there. But ultimately what it comes down to is the people of Ohio, even a red state like that, they want to kill babies because our culture has to have dead babies in order to function, right? That's the reality of the world that we have today. And I don't know how you change that, right? I don't know how you change the culture of a people. I don't think you can vote your way out of that. I really don't. And so if that's if that's where we're at today, what do we do in light of that? Right. If you can't change it electorally, what do you do? I mean, ultimately, and this is what I've said before, is like the church has to be just way better on this, has to be consistent and has to provide the moral clarity that we haven't, that we've refused to. And that I think is beginning to happen. And I think that's why, like abolitionism and things like that are continuing to grow quite a bit very quickly, because that they provide moral clarity on the issue that the pro-life movement and evangelical churches refuse to do. And so that's where we have to go. And the flip side of that too is learning how to acquire power and wield it in places that we can. So in states where we can do it, that's where it has to be done. And because you're going to continue to have this great sort throughout the country where the states that are much more conservative on social issues will drive out the people that are repulsed by that. Right. So if you have a state, right, say Dusty Devers in Oklahoma is successful, and I pray that he is, and he's able to outlaw abortion completely in that state. Well, a lot of people that love killing babies are going to leave Oklahoma and never come back. Yeah. And that's good, right? That's what we should want. We should want to be able to acquire power and wield it in places that we can. And I think that's the goal. And so from the people that, bringing it back to Trump, the people that are critical of him, and I think the ones that are like rightfully critical of him, it's not just this opportunity to take a pot shot at him in this hypocritical fashion like Big Eva does. The people that are genuinely critical for consistent, anti-abortion reasons. The thing that I think their criticism lands the most accurately on is him attacking, states like Alabama and Arizona over the abortion laws, because that hampers pro-life efforts at the state level. And so that's the bigger problem. And again, like you have to think, okay, why is he doing that? like from his perspective, why is he doing those things? Is he doing it because like he really loves killing babies and wants people to be able to kill babies, or is he doing it right like a left-wing ideologue, right?
Yeah.
Or is it because he reads the political tea leaves and knows that in order to win a national election, that's the kind of stuff he's got to say.
Yeah.
Right. And it brings me
no
pleasure at all to say that, but that's, I think, the truth.
Yeah, and I've got an analogy it's a World War II analogy. So even our older crowd will understand it, and that's a joke, folks. But but I was honestly thinking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I mean, when you look at the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I've got a few things to say, and then I actually want to talk about why I think that the 2024 election is sort of our end game election, to use a reference from Andrew's favorite movie. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer, when he was standing against Hitler, and obviously, you know, there's revisionist history, there's a whole debate on all that stuff. Was Dietrich Bonhoeffer super solid? I don't want to get into any of that. I just want to talk about the facts on the ground, being that Dietrich Bonhoeffer knew that what Hitler was doing was wrong, and what was happening under Germany during that time was wrong. And he did his best to try to change things culturally. Once he reached a point where he realized the culture could not change properly, what did he do? He was a part of a coup. He pretended to be a Hitler loyalist in order to get into the inner circle to make an assassination attempt on Hitler's life. He was the guy that was out there doing the Nazi salute, the loudest and proudest, in order to fit in and to be a shrewd man. And so because of that, you know, that's just a prime example of this pacifist who absolutely did not want to ever do any violence to anyone, realized I could not actually change the culture of the church. He was pushing churches to outright condemn Hitler, and they weren't coming his way. And so what did he do? He went underground, and he did the shrewd thing, and he pretended to be a loyalist, specifically with the intention of going inside and foiling Hitler that way. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about switching gears to the election, why I think it's so important. So I wrote an article, I sent it over to you, Andrew, and we don't have time to get into all of it. I kind of just going to give the Cliff Notes version of it, since we're burning through time here. But I basically, I think it's important that we look back on 2020 and what happened right after the 2020 election, because I think people forget how close we were to losing our country in 2021 when Joe Biden took office. So you got to think back on what happened then in 2021 when Joe Biden took office. Democrats had the presidency, the Senate, and the House. They had a trifecta. They controlled all the institutions with the exception of the Supreme Court. But what were some of the things that they wanted to do? One of the things that they wanted to do was pack the Supreme Court. And for those of you who are not familiar, there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Right now, roughly 5 of them are conservative because we have squishy John Roberts, and we never know what way he's going to go. But we essentially have a majority conservative Supreme Court, barely. And packing the Supreme Court would ultimately be Joe Biden and the Democrat legislature saying, we now want there to be more justices on the Supreme Court so that Joe Biden can appoint 4 more justices that are liberal activists that don't even know what a woman is. And ultimately, they were going to make the Supreme Court transform generationally towards a progressive court. That's one of the things that they wanted to do. They were foiled by that because 2 Democrat senators refused to give way on the filibuster. Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, one of which was in a swing state, Arizona, which is honestly pretty conservative at its roots. That's the McCain state, so it's got a lot of issues there. But either way, I think Kyrsten was thinking politically, and I think Joe Manchin was as well. He was in a deep red West Virginia state. It is the most Trump state next to Oklahoma.
By far, yeah.
By far.
Yeah.
And these individuals did not break the filibuster. And you have to remember, there were left-wing activists chasing Kyrsten Sinema into the restroom, physically intimidating her, trying to get her to cave. Joe Manchin was being offered a whole bunch of backdoor deals that we still don't even know everything he was offered, but you know it was happening. And these individuals, honestly, I think it was by the grace of God that these individuals did not cave on the filibuster, because they were 100% progressive on every other vote, with the exception of that. But some of the other things that they would have done if they would have broke the filibuster, and keep in mind, they would have transformed the Supreme Court. So our legislation, even state right arguments, would have all died in the highest court in the land. And let's face it, have you ever seen a red state defy the Supreme Court? So that's not going to happen. We knew that was out of the question. So some of the other things that they wanted to do, taxpayer-funded abortion would be unrestricted and enshrined into law underneath a trifecta, Democratic Congress, presidency, and then pair that with a radical left Supreme Court. Okay, so abortion would have been the law of the land. It probably would have been something much more extreme than Roe v. Wade, too. They probably would have gone for unrestricted, full-term abortion. The other thing that they wanted to do, make Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. into states. If they did that, you have to think about this politically for a moment. Don't disregard all the moral arguments. Politically, these are two states that would have been reliably left-leaning, which would have provided 2 senators each, making 4 more left-leaning senators now available in the U.S. Senate, making the U.S. Senate near impossible to ever flip back to Republican control. And then, of course, they'd probably get a couple extra congressmen to be sent from Puerto Rico into the House of Representatives, and Puerto Rico would add electoral votes to the Electoral College. Washington, D.C. already gets 3 electoral votes, but Puerto Rico would add, I don't know how many exactly, but either way, basically this would enshrine. It wouldn't enshrine. It would basically make it all near impossible to ever have Republicans control any institution ever again. It would have turned us into a one-party state. And I say all these things because we have abolitionists that are understandably very angry at the comments Trump made. I'm not happy with them either. My personal stance is equal protection under the law. That's what I want to see happen. But what we're forgetting right now is I think people are quick to say, well, we can't vote Trump in November because we have to teach him a lesson. Great. Well, I truly think we are in the end game now, folks. I think that should Democrats manage to flip the House of Representatives back, which, reminder, people are retiring. We have like a 1-seat majority in the House right now. So that's not a heavy lift. And if they manage to keep the Senate, and if they manage to keep Joe Biden in office, I don't think they're going to have another Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin, both of which are going to be out. You know, I mean, realistically, they're going to be gone. So if we have a lockstep Senate that kills the filibuster, everything that they were hoping to do in 2021 when Joe Biden took office will most likely happen. We genuinely will probably see the transformation of this country should Biden win and they flip both houses of Congress. And I say that because abolitionists are not thinking about the fact, and I'm not saying every abolitionist, I consider myself an abolitionist in terms of what I want. I'm willing to take incremental wins, but end game, abolitionist. End goal, abolitionist. But ultimately, we're going to see abortion enshrined into law in a way that we can never undo for at least a generation. It will take, I don't know if we'll ever get our country back, honestly, if all these things happen. And then you pair that with the greatest threat to our nation, which is the open border. I think that's the greatest thing. Like you said, Andrew, I see the same thing that you mentioned. On the ground, I see so much good fruit happening all around me. I think pastors are beginning to realize what time it is, or at least more of them are. I think the weak churches, the big Eva type churches, are starting to empty out, and churches that have faithful ministers who are brave and courageous, their pews are starting to fill up. And I think with time, given the fact that we have more children than they do, we aren't killing our kids, we aren't sacrificing them to Moloch. In time, I think we will see a true revival in America. But that won't happen if we're replaced by individuals from the third world who have different ideologies that can replace us, come and vote, and provide more electoral votes to states like New York and California. I mean, it's all politics. They are truly using the system against us. And I think should they win in November, and we don't see mass deportations under a Trump administration, and if they flip both houses in Congress, I truly think our country will probably be gone forevermore. And, you know, maybe I'm being alarmist, but, you know, to some degree, I think it's good to be alarmist in an election year. So, I mean, we only got about 5 minutes, Andrew, but feel free to respond to any of that.
No, you're right. Like to think through, like, you know, just what the political eventualities are of that come from losing. Like you have to reckon with reality, right? That's that's like consistently what I'm trying to say is, right. We can pretend that, yeah, we're gonna teach Trump a lesson, and we're gonna teach the Republicans a lesson. We're gonna hold our votes and make them pro-life, and it's like, yeah, then at best they all adopt our positions and they lose, and we lose the entire country, right? That is, and some people are like, well, then I guess we do. That's what we deserve because of abortion.
Yeah.
And it's like they take this like fatalistic view of, well, then if we don't end it immediately right now, then we deserve to lose our country. And it's like, all right, then, well, I guess we do that. Like, there's just there's no point in engaging in politics at all. If it means we are doomed to lose. And so, no, I want there to continue to be an America, and I want America to do what is right and to be discipled faithfully by faithful Christians. And yeah, and that's exactly it, right? You can't ban abortion in America if it doesn't exist, right? You transform America into Guatemala and Honduras and Senegal, and you're not going to you're going to have this like left-wing revolutionary rule until the whole country, descends into anarchy. And I mean, maybe people think like, that's good. Yeah, we're gonna have this collapse, and then finally my ideology will prevail. And it's like, that's not how things happen in history.
Right.
And the thing that our forefathers and our ancestors gave us as an inheritance is this really a precious and fragile thing that we just want to like quickly throw away, because we don't have the power at the moment to correct the things that are wrong. And you have to think long term. You have to think about what are the things strategically that we can do to maintain the existence of our country, and two, then gaining power within that country and transforming it in the way that God wants us to, right? That's how these things work. And I mean, the thing that clouds everything is that we don't have a very well discipled, well thought out way of thinking about politics, a Christian political philosophy, right? People 100 or 200 years ago, Christian thinkers did have that, and they understood, right, what's a Christian's relation to power, to political power, how does Christian political order work, and we were naive to those things, right? We either have this Anabaptistic view, or we have this very pietistic view that we have to have this perfect purity now, and if we can't have that, anything short of that is compromise. And yeah. I don't think that's wise. I don't think that's being faithful with the things that God has put at our disposal at this moment. That's the point I want to make. It's not that if you're voting for these people and you feel like you're compromising, I don't think you are, right? Because at the end of the day, do you still want abortion to be outlawed? Absolutely you do. And you make the political calculus that no matter how you vote, that's not going to happen, right? With this ballot that you're casting or not casting, right? That it's not on the table right now. And what is on the table is whether we have a country or not. And I hope that he wins. I hope that he wins, and that we can begin to correct the damage that's been done to the country. And even that is still a steep uphill climb, right? One of the great criticisms, the constant criticisms that people make, and they made during the primary campaign, is that he wasn't able to, accomplish anything in his 4 years as president. It's like, well, no, I think he did accomplish things, of course, among them, right, overturning Roe versus Wade, but also like preventing war, right? It's really important. And on top of that, like, yeah, if you recognize, okay, he didn't have actual political power. Like he nominally held the presidency, but none of the departments were loyal to him at all. And just by winning the presidential election doesn't, like, you snap your fingers and all of a sudden you have control of the government. You don't, right? You have this entirely unelected, unaccountable deep state that actually runs the country, and he's just nominally in charge of it and is able to, steer policy a little bit. But like you had generals just flat out lying to him about how many troops we had in Syria. Like they straight up lied.
They just lied, so he couldn't pull them all out.
And and I don't think people get it. Like, you had the Joint Chiefs of Staff sending him a letter saying, if you call up the military to put down the riots, we are going to remove you from office. And it's like, what's a guy supposed to do in that circumstance? And it's like, even with like Fauci and things like that, why did he fire Fauci? Why did he do that? It's like, because they would have removed him from office if he did, right? He would have been impeached in the middle of that and successfully convicted. Or they just do the 25th Amendment and take him out. Like, I think people think like it's way simpler than it is, and that he would have way more power than he does. And he doesn't. Like, this is a tiny bit of power to hold back, these forces at bay. And I would rather have that than have, no wrench in the system, and it can run smoothly and they can do whatever they want, like you've laid out. Exactly. And so that's what's before us. And I don't think you're compromising on your views if you say it's not what I want and what I think is true and right and what we must do and what we must accomplish. That's not going to happen no matter what I do in this election. It's just not. And so keeping that in mind, because our entire country is wicked and loves the murder of babies, no one is going to get elected to put an end to that. Right now, I need to think through what I do to get to that point. And one is just like, we have to still have a country. Yeah. Right. We do. And the only means of bringing that about is if he wins. Right. That's just the nuts and bolts of it. And I think like it's so like clear too. I don't think it's like a really difficult thing where I'm in anguish over it. It's clear, like, this is what's in front of us. Yep.
I completely agree. And, in closing, I'll just let you all know as well in the audience, especially you individuals who are listening who are abolitionists. I am, assuming there's no cancellations next week, I will actually have Joshua Smith on the podcast. He is running for the Libertarian ticket as one of their presidential nominees, and they've yet to select their presidential candidate. He is an abolitionist, and he will probably be the only potential abolitionist on the ballot if he ends up getting their nomination. And so I am going to be interviewing an abolitionist, so you guys can see, there's a fair hearing of the abolitionist standpoint. And again, I consider myself an abolitionist in terms of my end goal. It's just how we get there in the meantime with the cards that we have. But we'll let Joshua make the case for why you should vote for him. If you guys, if your conscience is convicted about Trump, then I'm providing someone who can give you an option. So be sure to tune into that next week. In fact, that one won't be done live. That'll be pre-recorded, but either way, it'll come out next week. So be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, though, as of right now, I feel like Trump just is the only choice that makes sense, because I don't think that there is such thing as voting for lesser of two evils. We are all evil. No one is good except for our Lord and Savior. And as a result, I choose to vote in a way that lessens evil. And in my mind, I'm going to vote for the candidate that I think can actually win, that's going to be closest to my values, far from 100% aligned, but closest to them. And right now, that the only person that I think has a shot at winning that's closer to my values, at least significantly closer than what we have currently, is Donald Trump. So I'll kind of close with that. But Andrew, where can people go to find you and keep up with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, I do a podcast with CJ Engel every week called Contramundum. So that's on YouTube, and we also live stream it on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter and Gab at BonifaceOption is my handle, and it's on my shirt too. And so you can find me there, and I write periodically as well, and I'm working on some more books as well. So keep an ear out for those things. But yeah, that's where you can find us. And this week we're going to be interviewing Martyr Maid, and as well we'll keep discussing Christian nationalism this week. We're going to continue going over I can't even think of the guy's name. Michael Bird, his book Against Christian Nationalism. This weird Australian guy, and he's terrible. Yeah. And yeah, BonifaceOption Part 2, chop
harder.
maybe that's in the works. We'll see. But yeah, so a lot of good stuff coming up that we have in store.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again for joining, Andrew. And thank you all for listening. Feel free to go over to our Substack, forgeandanvil.substack.com. Sign up with your email to get free content. And then, of course, you can sign up to be a paid supporter if you feel inclined. But under the Brandon economy, I understand if you can't. Either way, though, we appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next time.